Sitaram, Namaste. My name is Dr. Visham Bhimull, founder of Caribbean Hindustani, an organization involved in the documenting, archiving, and recording of the Indo-Caribbean experience. As we all know, Diwali is a national holiday in Trinidad and Tobago, and part of that Indo-Caribbean experience. I'm here today to just talk about how it became a holiday and how celebrations have evolved over the years. Shortly after the independence of Trinidad and Tobago, I guess the average Trinidad and Tobagonian were struggling to fit under the identity of what is Trinbagonian. And that would also include the Indo-Trinbagonian space. That was a time where the Indo-Trinbagonian was looking at its day-to-day, how it would celebrate festivals under the umbrella of being Trinbagonian. Diwali at that time was celebrated, yes, but not in a grand way as we know it today. It was actually celebrated more at the level of the home as we know it during indentureship times. Things would take place at home, such as cleaning, preparing, cooking, doing what we call Lakshmi Puja, and then lighting of the diyas at the level of the home. That slowly changed over the years because of events that took place in Trinidad and Tobago shortly after independence. In 1966, there was a contingent, especially key players from the Sanatan Dharma Mahasabha, Bade Sagar Maharaj, who was the president, as well as Pandit Janki Prasad Maharaj. He was the Dharmacharya at that time. He is the father of the current president of the National Council of Indian Culture, Mr. Devkinandan Sharma. Then there was Pandit Govardhan, who is the father of the former MP Surajratan Rambachan, and Pandit Lakshmi Prasad. This was a contingent that went to visit the then Prime Minister Dr. Eric Williams to sign a document to declare Diwali a national holiday. That was quite important. Why? Because Diwali is now a national holiday and it has now come into the national space. Before, it was limited to celebration among just Indo-Trinbagonians, and now it came out. If we look at Phagwa, for instance, that is not necessarily national because again it's limited to the Indo-Trinbagonian space. Now Diwali has moved out of that, becoming a national holiday. What we saw at that point was more celebrations in a community context. So you had youth groups, mandirs, Hindu organizations started organizing Diwali celebration that was, well, more community based as opposed to home based than before. Just ushering into the oil boom years, which was also important, was the Black Power movement. And the Black Power movement was an international movement and this was a post-colonial time where everyone was struggling for an identity and empowerment in their identity. This was also key, just like the independence of Trinidad and Tobago, for the Indo-Trinbagonian to also question their space in the nation of Trinidad and Tobago. So it saw a lot of research with regard to that as well. The oil boom years, which would be in the 1970s, was also very important. Why? Any nation or any culture could only strive towards empowering its everyday and identity through funding, through financing. And we saw that in Trinidad through the oil boom years, where a lot was done, not specifically for or only for the Indo-Trinbagonian identity and space, but for Trinidad and Tobago as a whole. That saw a lot of even more mass celebration. Businesses as well as the government, non-governmental organizations as well started celebrating Diwali more and more. So you'd see companies would tend to have Diwali luncheons for their employees. So slowly we see it moving away from private home celebration into more the national space. As we move away from the 1970s, we now enter the 1980s, and another pivotal point in celebrations for Diwali in Trinidad and Tobago. At that time, the president of the National Council of Indian Culture was Mr. Hans Hanuman Singh, and his brainchild was what we know today as the Diwali Nagar, an actual physical space where every single Trinidadian could come together to celebrate Diwali at a national level. This was indeed one of the first times that we saw people coming together on this one stage, as we would have a one stage for Carnival. We have one stage now for Diwali. That was a key important point, because the Diwali Nagar itself didn't stop there. As the years go by, it actually brought Trinidad and Tobago to the center stage internationally as a country that celebrates Diwali in a grand way. The National Council of Indian Culture has also started branches not that, outside of Trinidad, in Canada and New York as well. So our celebrations here, as per that brand, has now moved beyond into the secondary diaspora. Having our very first Indo-Trinbagonian Prime Minister meant we saw even an extension of where Diwali celebrations would take place, especially in the public sector, in government, in businesses, as well as state boards and even non-governmental organizations, key players with regard to commerce in Trinidad and Tobago. Diwali, apart from being a national celebration in Trinidad and Tobago, is actually an international celebration. As I mentioned, it was brought by indentured laborers and then passed on to their descendants, who were mostly Hindu. There are a lot of festivals like these in Trinidad, of the Hindu celebrations example, but there are also other religious celebrations. What I want to bring into the fore here is that what we celebrate here in Trinidad actually shows the roots of our identity that was brought to this country during colonial times. If we were to notice, a lot of festivals that is celebrated in the Hindu calendar also closely coincides Roman Catholic festivals that are celebrated here. If we look at Shivratri tends to occur just on the Carnival weekend. If we look at Holi, it happens just before Easter. And now we are talking about Diwali. Diwali happens around the time of Halloween, All Saints and All Souls. That is no coincidence. They all come from a common tradition, especially that had evolved from a temperate climate with changes in season. So if we look at a lot of the festivals we celebrate here, they actually center around that. If we go back to a bit of secondary school geography, and we look at the longest day of the year, which is on June 21st or 22nd, and the shortest day of the year, which is December 22nd or 23rd, the days actually get shorter from that period, from June all the way to December. And we also know a transition from summer into autumn and then into winter. When we look at Diwali, prior to Diwali, which happens in autumn in India being a country that is in the northern hemisphere, there are a series of calendar events, religious and otherwise, that take place prior to Diwali, and that starts with Navaratri. Navaratri means 9 nights, and it usually would be at the beginning of autumn. It celebrates the feminine aspects of God, and 9 days are dedicated to veneration of that aspect of God. And it ends in what we call Dashahara or Dussehra, which is the 10th lunar day of that particular Hindu month of Ashwin. It's very important that day because it commemorates when Lord Ram slayed the demon Ravan. Navaratri and Ram Leela actually coincides. During the Navaratri period is when we do celebrate Ram Leela, and on that Dussehra date is the date where effigies of Ravan is constructed and burnt to the ground in that commemoration. This ushers in autumn, and 20 days after this Dussehra date is when we do celebrate Diwali itself. Again, remember, the days are getting shorter and shorter. If we look at a month actually consists of 2 fortnights. A fortnight from the new moon to the full moon, and then from full moon back to new moon. That is a very pivotal or important point to note when we look at the festivals we celebrate here in Trinidad and Tobago. I'm bringing it from the perspective or a Hindu perspective, and I could go into how it is in the Roman Catholic perspective as well. In the Hindu lunar month, and remember I mentioned Ashwin, where Navaratri is celebrated, after Ashwin is Kartik, and this would be the months of autumn. A full moon is called a Purnima, and a new moon is called an Amawas. So a waxing fortnight, when we go to from new moon to full moon, it goes from a dark night to a bright full moon night. We call it a Shukla Paksh. Shukla meaning bright, or waxing in this context. And then when we go from Purnima, or the new moon, back to the new moon or the Amawas, we call that a Krishna Paksh. Krishna means dark. That is the name of the Hindu god Krishna, because he had a dark complexion. So that means waning. So it's important to note that there is an Amawas every lunar month. As the days get shorter, the darkest or Maha Amawas occurs in Kartik, and that is when we celebrate Diwali. That is actually the Maha Dipavali or Lakshmi Puja night. But that is the main festival. Internationally, and even in India, there are actually 5 days. This day, or the Maha Amawas, or the darkest night of the year, is the third day. The first day of Diwali actually is what we call the Dhanteras or Dhana Trayodashi. That celebrates, there's a famous story where demons and the gods were churning the ocean of milk to attain the ambrosia or nectar of immortality. It is said that that nectar was brought out by Dhanvantari. Dhanvantari is the divine physician, an incarnation of Lord Vishnu, held in his hand the pot, the ambrosia, to deliver it to those who were churning the ocean. And we celebrate Dhanvantari at this point. On the second day, this is called Choti Diwali, or it marks when Lord Krishna kills the demon Narakasur. So we call it Narak Chaturdashi. Now notice I mentioned things like Trayodashi, Chaturdashi. People know Ram Navami, people know Ekadashi, and they associated with festivals that Hindus celebrate. Remember I mentioned that we have fortnights. So in these fortnights are 14 days. So these are actually the ordinals, the first, the second, the third, the fourth. So Trayodashi means the 13th of that waning fortnight, and Chaturdashi means the 14th. So 13th and 14th. And it comes in importantly where we name festivals, especially in the Hindu calendar within our Trinbagonian context. The Amawas or Maha Amawas now occurs on the third day. Prior to that, when we have the Choti Diwali, we actually light a diya called Jam Ke Diya, and Jam Ke Diya, Jam is the Bhojpuri word for Yam, the god of death, celebrated in Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and all sects of Hinduism. The Hindiya becomes Ja. It's significant. Why? Because we celebrate Badi Diwali. We actually venerate our ancestors for carrying on this tradition and now passing it on to us to celebrate. After Choti Diwali is Badi Diwali, and that is the Maha Amawas. And the Maha Amawas is where we do Lakshmi Puja. It is said that that's when Lakshmi came out of the same churning of the ocean. Lakshmi is the goddess of wealth. Not physical wealth, but wealth in all aspects. Wealth in knowledge, wealth in health, wealth in physical aspects, so you could maintain your health and wealth, and spiritual wealth. The murti behind me represents that goddess, and that is the focus or center of Diwali, because she is the form of the divine that we worship through Lakshmi Puja. Usually at in this Maha Amawas or the Maha Amawas, we spend time cleaning, cooking. We do Lakshmi Puja at 6, and then all the diyas are lit. The diyas are lit around the house, on stairs, in the yard, in the streets, and there are also local representation of flambeaux that are also lit, which doesn't come from an Indian tradition, but it represents the light. I want to call your mind now to imagine this, Diwali, lighting of the diyas, and then we look at All Saints and All Souls, where we light the houses with candles, and we light the cemetery again, and it happens around the same period in autumn. So there is a link. It's not a coincidence. we all know the fireworks and everything else that goes with Diwali, and the food, the mithai meaning sweets, which is very popular. But I'm so happy to have this opportunity now to explain how scientifically all this is related. And then the day this is the third day. The fourth day, or after the main Diwali day, is we call it Govardhan Puja. Now, Govardhan is what we know it as in Trinidad, the Bhojpuri word. It is an actual Mount Govardhan in India, in the village where Lord Krishna lived. The story goes that Lord Indra is the same divinity we worship in Greek tradition as Zeus, same tradition as Jupiter in Roman, the god who controls the thunder, the lightning, the sky, and the king of the gods. He challenged Lord Krishna, as he is the ultimate supreme, and rained on the village of Lord Krishna. Lord Krishna, with his baby finger, lifted up Mount Govardhan as an umbrella and sheltered the entire village, saving them from the rains. And this is what we actually celebrate on the fourth day with Govardhan Puja. We make an effigy with dirt and lipe or paste cow dung, gobar, on it, and represent dubgrass as the trees, and worship that and worship Lord Krishna in commemoration of this and remembrance of the divine, as how he basically is our soul protector and our soul provider. The last day is called, or the fifth day is called Bhai Dooj, and it's just like Raksha Bandhan, where sisters remember their brothers, and rekindle that bond, or at least dedicate the day to their brothers. Of these 5 days, only the second, third, and fourth we actually celebrate with much fervence in Trinidad, whereas in other places in India the 5 days are celebrated not necessarily how we would celebrate it in Trinidad. As you would all notice that in explaining all of this, I mentioned a lot of words from Sanskrit as well as Hindi and Bhojpuri. And I want to bring in the point here about how our heritage languages are important if we are to understand who we are and our identity. We exist in a diaglossia of Trinidad English Creole, which a lot call broken English, but not exactly a separate language, and then we speak standard Trinidad English. Within that continuum exist words from Trinidad Patois, which comes from our French Creole history. There exist Chinese words, there exist Tamil words, there exist Amerindian words, and what I brought to the fore today, Hindustani words, part of the initiative I do with Caribbean Hindustani. It's very important for us to understand these words and what they mean, because what we find is that we lose our sense of ourselves and our identity when we lose what these words would mean. So I'll go through some. We said Diwali. Diwali actually is a contraction of a Sanskrit term Deepavali. Deep means light, Avali means a row of. So Diwali or Deepavali means a row of lights. And we celebrate these lights with diyas, right? Diyas is what the light is. The deep is the light, and the diya is the earthen vessel in which the oil is poured and the diya is lit. Diya jalawe, that's an expression I remember my grandmother used to use. It means to light the diya, right? And Diwali manawe, that's another expression that is not in use anymore. It means to celebrate Diwali. We fail to realize a lot of times that what it is, the Trinity English Creole we speak, we tend to think it's inferior to standard English. We tend to now forget, because of a colonial mentality, that it is our identity and who we are, and it marks who we are. It doesn't matter our phenotype. I look like a person of Indian origin. Somebody else might look like a person of Chinese origin, a person of African origin, and so on. But what do we share? We share this Trinity English Creole. This Trinity English Creole, if I were to go into a space in be it the US, be it in Canada or Europe, and speak this, and there would be another Trini, irrespective of his origins, we would connect, because it's who we are, it's our identity, it's what makes us Trinbagonian. And we highlight the language here. I want to just look at how, because A lot of our Trini English Creole comes from Trinidad Patois. It's grammar system, but there are a lot of words from Hindustani. I want to look at two expressions that we would use, and the old people would use it. I want to look at actually a sentence, my dad's Pua, my dad's paternal aunt. Yes, Pua. That's another word we could use. It means your father's sister, and that's how specific Hindustani is. She had said once in an interview, "Yeah, easier boy, them thief and them shooting the khaki wheel and thing." That is Trinidad English Creole with remnants of Trinidad Patois, Hindustani, grammar and vocabulary, right? And it represents our identity. The khaki wheel means the wheels of the car. K is the possessive particle. There are also expressions I remember my grandmother would use, again from Hindustani, and only after I realized that it forms part of our English Creole. Normally when we would express in Trinidad English Creole, I can't. We don't say I can't, we say I don't know how to. Right? I don't know how to do this, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to make this, I can't make this. In Trinidad Bhojpuri, they actually have an expression, hum na jani, I don't know. And often in interviews I do for Caribbean Hindustani, if someone says they don't know how to cook, or they don't know how to clean, or they can't cook or they can't clean, to cook is pakawe, to clean or wash is dhoe. So one of the interviewees said, hum na jani dhoe, hum na jani pakawe. I don't know how to cook, I don't know how to wash. And we see that in Trinidad English Creole, where we express ourselves and say, I don't know how to do this or do that. It means I don't know how to, it means I can't, I'm not able to. Two other things I could remember. A lot of times, you know the expression somebody might say, do it for me now. That na expression actually comes from Hindustani, because we know in Bollywood films and songs, dekho na, look na. It also, as a Trini, and I guess if anybody else who not Trini may not necessarily understand, we understand what the na is. The na actually makes the command a little bit more polite. And then there's the expression ta, which comes from Bhojpuri. It means a point of emphasis, so it could also mean so. But one expression that my grandmother would often use, sita means look na, or look at it. Sita as an emphasis. Emphasis is an emphatic point. So that ta also comes from Trinidad Bhojpuri. These are just two examples. I guess in further series we'll look at how Trinidad Bhojpuri / Hindustani has influenced our Trinidad English Creole. But we leave it here today. A popular expression in Trinidad Bhojpuri as well as Hindi. In Hindi it's Shubh Diwali, but we say Subh Diwali in Bhojpuri. I'd like to wish everybody a happy Diwali. I'd like to thank the National Trust for this opportunity to talk about Diwali from a historical perspective and a linguistic perspective, as well as an anthropological perspective. And I would like to invite the viewers to visit Caribbean Hindustani, the Facebook page, as well as the website caribbeanhindustani.org. And Dhanyavad. Shubh Diwali.